My HOA president tried to steal a lake, the one I built for my dying wife. I'm standing on my dock, the one I built with my own hands, watching a sheriff's deputy hand me a cease and desist letter. Behind him, Bryn Castellano is filming me with her phone, smirking like she's already spending my money. 6 months earlier, I'd bought this 12-acre lake for $340,000. It was a toxic mess, algae blooms, dead fish, a dam held together by rust and prayer. I restored every inch. My wife has Parkinson's, and doctors said peace in nature might slow it down. This was supposed to be our sanctuary. Bryn didn't own a single foot of my property, but she claimed a 50-year-old HOA covenant gave her community access rights. The $480,000 I'd poured into this place was hanging by a thread. She had a lawyer and a fake document. I had the truth, and I was done backing down. Ever dealt with an HOA that weaponized made-up rules? Drop your story below. Where are you watching from? Let's see how far this corruption spreads. Let me take you back to where this nightmare started, or maybe where my dream did. Hard to tell the difference anymore. My name's Garrett Fisk, 54, retired civil engineer. Spent 30 years designing bridges and water systems, the kind of work that'll outlast me by a century. Comfortable life. Predictable. Then my wife Melinda started dropping things. Not on purpose. Her hands would just let go. Coffee mugs. Her phone. Once our grandson's hand while crossing the street. 6 doctors later, early onset Parkinson's at age 52. The neurologist said stress was gasoline on the fire. What she needed was peace, nature, and a project that gave her purpose while she could still move. I found Lake Thornwell 3 months later. 12 acres of water, 45 minutes outside Springfield, Missouri. Middle of nowhere, which was the point. The listing photos looked like a crime scene, water green as antifreeze, dead trees, a dam with more cracks than concrete. The previous owner, Edgar Whitlock, had let it rot for 15 years after his wife died, too heartbroken to fix it, too stubborn to sell. When Melinda and I first walked the property, the smell hit like a punch, sulfur and death, thick enough to taste. The shoreline mud was black quicksand that sucked her shoe clean off. She laughed. We both did, because what else could we do? Then she stood at the end of the collapsing dock. I wouldn't let her walk on it, and smiled at that toxic swamp, her hands shaking like they always did now. We could make this beautiful, she said. Not you. We. I bought it for $340,000. My real estate attorney ran every check title search, lien search, easement search. Everything came back spotless. Fee simple ownership, meaning I owned it from bedrock to sky. No HOA, no restrictions, no strings. Here's a property tip if you're buying land. Fee simple means nobody else has claim to your dirt. Always verify this before signing anything. I closed on a Tuesday. By Monday, I had an excavator and a dream. By Wednesday, I had Bryn Castellano. She rolled up in a white Escalade that had never seen dirt, parked across my entrance like she owned it. I was waist deep in the water, pulling invasive weeds covered in mud that smelled like rotten eggs baking in August heat. She sat in her air conditioning for 10 minutes, making me wait, before stepping out in cream pants that cost more than my waiters. You're the new owner? Voice like sweetened poison. I pulled off my gloves. Garrett Fisk, just closed last week. Bryn Castellano, HOA president for Thornwell Estates. She held out a hand but didn't step close enough for me to reach without coming to her. I didn't move. Lake's not part of any HOA, I said. I checked. Her smile stayed perfect. The 1973 Development Covenant designated this lake as community recreational amenity. We have shared access rights. She pulled photocopied papers from a leather portfolio. Does that covenant appear on my deed? No, but is it recorded with the county? It was filed in 1973. Ma'am, this lake was privately owned in 1973. Edgar Whitlock bought it in '69. Your neighborhood didn't exist yet. I gestured at the rusted gate. Show me one photo of your people using this property in 15 years. Just one. The smile cracked. You'll need HOA approval before modifying this lake. For my private property that's half a mile from your nearest house? I don't think so. She put her sunglasses back on. Those designer frames probably cost what I paid for a month's health insurance for Melinda. You'll hear from our attorney. I'd stop work if I were you. Liability issues. Her heels clicked across the gravel like a timer counting down. I should have called my lawyer right then. Instead, I went back to clearing weeds because Melinda was coming the next morning to plant native grasses, and I wanted it ready. 3 days later, the letter arrived from Kendrick and Holt, attorneys at law. They wanted $850 just for my attorney to review their bogus claim. $850 I could have spent on Melinda's medications. That's when I realized Bryn wasn't trying to win. She was trying to bleed me dry until I gave up. She'd picked the wrong engineer. That $850 attorney fee? Just the opening shot. My lawyer, Simone Brackwell, reviewed Bryn's covenant claim in 20 minutes. Her verdict: complete bullshit. The covenant she's citing was filed for Thornwell Heights subdivision 8 miles away. Different developer, zero connection to your lake. Legally, you've already won. Practically, that'll cost you 10 grand proving you're right. I sent Bryn a professional email with Simone's opinion letter attached. Thought we'd move on like adults. 3 days later, I'm bolting down decking on my new dock permits pulled, everything by the book, when I hear multiple vehicles. Bryn's Escalade plus 2 more cars blocking my driveway. She brought an entourage. 2 HOA board members, Porter in an orange safety vest trying to look official, Jillian with a clipboard and some guy in cargo shorts holding a laser measure and tripod, dressed like a surveyor. They walked onto my dock without asking. Bryn pointed at the water. "Mr. Fisk, we need to verify your dock isn't extending into community waters." I stood up, drill still in hand. "There are no community waters. Our surveyor needs to check the property line." She gestured to cargo shorts guy. I walked over to him. "You licensed in Missouri?" He blinked. "I'm Porter's brother-in-law. I help with measurements sometimes." "So that's a no." I turned to Bryn. "You brought a fake surveyor to manufacture evidence on my property?" Her jaw tightened. "We're entitled to verify." "You're entitled to leave. Now." Porter stepped forward, chest puffed. "We're standing on community easement." "There is no easement. Get off my land." 30 years managing construction crews taught me how to make that voice carry. Bryn pulled out her phone, hit speaker. "Yes, I need to report a threatening situation at 4247 Lake Thornwell Road. The property owner is threatening us for asking questions about boundaries." My hands wanted to shake. I kept them steady. "I asked you to leave my private property. That's not a threat." Deputy Thane Buckley arrived 20 minutes later, young, uncomfortable, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. I knew before he spoke this would be civil matter, sort it out yourselves. But I had something better than an argument. I pulled up my phone, opened the county assessor's GIS map, something my old business partner had shown me years back when we were verifying construction sites. The system displays every property boundary in the county, updated in real time, and it's admissible in court because it's official government record. I zoomed to our location. Lake Thornwell, single parcel my name. Thornwell Estates, separate parcels, nowhere near the water. "Deputy, here's the county's own mapping system." I handed him the phone. He studied it, then looked at Bryn. "Ma'am, what documentation do you have?" She held up her photocopies. "Prescriptive easement through decades of use." "The property's been locked and gated 15 years, I said. "Previous owner has photos proving zero access. No continuous use means no prescriptive easement." That much I'd learned from Simone during our $850 consultation. Deputy Buckley sighed. "This is between your lawyers. Mr. Fisk has county documentation showing ownership. Unless you have contradictory official records, you need to leave." Bryn's face went purple. "Wealthy outsiders ignoring community standards." "I'm not wealthy. I'm a retired engineer who spent my savings on a lake to help my sick wife, and I verified every boundary before I bought." My voice came out colder than I intended. "You're harassing me because you want something that isn't yours." They left. But Bryn rolled down her window as she pulled away. "You just made an enemy." "No, you made one when you claimed my lake was yours." That night, Melinda found me staring at the water. "Maybe we should sell," she said softly. "Find somewhere easier." "No," I squeezed her trembling hand. "That's what she's counting on, that we'll be too tired to fight. I didn't spend 30 years building things just to let a bully with fake paperwork run me off. What if it gets worse? Then I get smarter." I kissed her forehead. "I'm an engineer. Problems are what I do." The next morning I drove to the county recorder's office. 6 hours in dusty files and microfiche later, I had proof. The 1973 covenant Bryn cited was filed for Thornwell Heights, different subdivision, 8 miles away. Her neighborhood, Thornwell Estates, wasn't built until 1998, and the developer never owned the lake because Edgar Whitlock wouldn't sell. I made 34 copies of my research timeline, plat maps, recorder stamps, and hand-delivered one to every house in her neighborhood. 1 page. Handwritten note: your HOA president is lying about my property. Here are the facts from county records. Let's be neighbors, not enemies. 48 hours later, 11 homeowners apologized. 5 said they'd never authorized Bryn's actions. 3 asked if their kids could fish once the lake was healthy. I said yes to all of them. That's when things got ugly. I woke up the next morning to find someone had dumped 50 gallons of used motor oil across my driveway entrance. The rainbow slick spread 10 feet wide. The petroleum smell made Melinda gag before she even got out of bed. That wasn't a legal move anymore. That was sabotage. The motor oil was just the beginning. Over the next month, someone waged war on my property. My steel mailbox, the one cemented 3 feet deep, smashed flat with a sledgehammer. Roofing nails scattered across my driveway. Melinda got a flat driving to her neurologist. I changed the tire on the highway shoulder while she sat shaking in the passenger seat, hands worse than I'd seen in weeks. Someone cut my equipment shed lock and filled my chainsaw's gas tank with sand. $4,000, engine seized, nothing stolen, just destroyed. But week 4 was different. That's when I realized Bryn wasn't just fighting for property anymore. She was fighting to break us. Missouri Child Protective Services called. A social worker named Renata needed to inspect our home. We received a report about unsafe conditions for children on your property. We don't have children here. Our grandkids visit once a month. The report claims exposed electrical near water, no dock safety fencing, and hazardous chemicals accessible to minors. My stomach dropped. Who filed this? Anonymous reports are confidential. I can inspect within 48 hours, or we involve the court. She came the next day, checked every outlet, every cabinet, every inch of dock. My electrical was permitted and county inspected. The dock had rails 6 inches higher than code required. The only chemicals were pool pH testing kits. Renata closed her laptop after 30 minutes. This is completely unfounded. I'm closing the case today. She glanced at Melinda, who sat on our couch crying quietly. Not from fear, from humiliation. A stranger had just inspected our bedroom, our bathroom, our marriage, because someone filed a lie. I can't confirm the source, Renata said softly, but I've seen this before. Adults weaponizing child welfare in property disputes. It's disgusting. I'm sorry. After she left, I held Melinda while she shook, Parkinson's tremors mixing with rage tremors until I couldn't tell the difference. Is it working? She whispered. Is she breaking us? I thought about the $4,000 chainsaw, the $850 lawyer fee, the 3 nights I hadn't slept because every sound outside meant another attack, the $15,000 I'd just spent emergency flushing fertilizer someone had dumped in my aerator intake, 72 hours of work to save 6 months of restoration. Yeah, I admitted. It's working. The next morning, someone knocked. I opened the door expecting more trouble and found Vic Castellano, Bryn's ex-husband. He was holding a manila folder and looked like he hadn't slept in days. We need to talk, he said. Vic still lived in Thornwell Estates, taught elementary school, couldn't afford to move after the divorce. He'd kept the family name because changing it cost money he didn't have. He spread papers across my kitchen table, court documents, police reports, emails. During our divorce, she filed false CPS reports on me, vandalized my truck, tried to get my teaching license investigated with 0 evidence. Everything got dismissed, but it cost me 18 months and $12,000. He tapped the folder. She's done this before. To me. To a neighbor who complained about her parking. She escalates until people leave. I scanned his documentation, a clear pattern of weaponized bureaucracy, manufactured crises, legal harassment. My old engineering professor used to say that understanding failure patterns was the key to prevention. I was seeing Bryn's pattern now. Why tell me this? Because you stood up to her. Those fact sheets you hand-delivered, that took guts. He pulled out a different document. And because there's something you need to know. She's embezzling from the HOA. Been doing it 2 years. I found evidence during divorce discovery, fake invoices, shell consulting companies. I didn't pursue it because I just wanted out. Everything clicked. This wasn't about lake access. It was about not wanting anyone looking at HOA finances. An audit would expose her. If your fight forces transparency, Vic said, she goes to prison. I installed 8 security cameras that afternoon. 4K resolution, night vision, cloud backup, $1,200. But I'd learned from a contractor friend once that documentation was cheaper than litigation. The cameras paid for themselves in 72 hours. Porter showed up at 2 a.m., sneaking around my dock with his phone, filming himself standing on it. Manufacturing evidence of community use, probably. The footage caught everything: his face, his license plate, the timestamp. I sent it to Simone, my attorney. "This is gold," she said. "Trespassing, evidence manufacturing, coordinating with Bryn. You're building a harassment case. Document everything for 90 days, then we bury them." 90 days felt like forever. The attacks continued: spray-painted cameras, drilled locks, more fertilizer dumps. But now I had proof. Every incident captured, time-stamped, backed up in 3 places. I sat on my dock one evening, exhausted, covered in mud from fixing the latest sabotage. My phone buzzed. Email from Missouri Department of Natural Resources. Grant Opportunity Private Land Conservation. I almost deleted it. Almost. But I'd learned something in 30 years of engineering. Sometimes the solution to your problem comes from a completely different direction than you expected. Sometimes what you're defending becomes the weapon you need. I opened the email. Everything was about to change. 4 a.m. I woke to a smell that didn't belong. Chemical sweet, cutting through the lake's normal scent of clean water and mud. I pulled on boots and grabbed a flashlight, stepping into darkness so thick I could barely see the dock. The smell got worse near the aerator intake. I knelt, shined the light across the water, and saw a milky sheen spreading from where someone had dumped something directly into my filtration system. I scooped a handful, slick, almost soapy. Chemical fertilizer, concentrated, enough to trigger an algae bloom that would kill everything I'd spent 6 months restoring. I had maybe 48 hours before total ecosystem collapse. Missouri DNR's emergency hazmat line said they'd send someone, but rural areas were low priority, 6 hours minimum. I didn't have 6 hours. The fertilizer was already leaching into the water column, and once it hit critical concentration, there'd be no stopping the chain reaction. So I did what engineers do when systems fail. I improvised a solution with whatever I had. I hit the equipment rental place the second they opened and got the biggest industrial water pump they had, $340 a day. For the next 47 hours, I manually extracted contaminated water into holding tanks. My back seized after hour 3. I tasted bile from exhaustion by hour 12. But stopping meant watching 6 months of work die, so I kept pumping. The DNR inspector finally arrived around noon. Trenton Mays, former Marine, sized up the situation in seconds. Me covered in chemical-smelling mud, 4 holding tanks full of milky water, empty 50-pound fertilizer bags I'd found hidden in the brush. He bagged the bags as evidence. One had a receipt corner still attached. "You got enemies, Mr. Fisk?" I handed him my 3-month documentation file, every incident, every police report, every expense. "Yeah, I got enemies." He read through it, standing there, jaw tightening with each page. "You know what this is legally? Environmental terrorism. Sounds dramatic, but Missouri streams connect. You contaminate one waterway, you've hit the watershed. That makes it federal if it spreads. Environmental terrorism." I'd been thinking property dispute. He was telling me it had crossed into something that could involve federal agencies. "Save every receipt," he said. "When we catch who did this, you'll want restitution. You said you have security cameras?" 8, but someone painted over the lenses 2 days ago. "Check your cloud backup. Most systems upload continuously before the camera's disabled." I pulled out my phone right there, logged in. The cameras were painted at 11:47 p.m., but the footage before that? Crystal clear. 11:52 p.m., Bryn's white Escalade, Porter hauling fertilizer bags, and Bryn actually filming on her phone while he dumped them at my aerator intake. The audio was faint but unmistakable. Make sure it's near that intake thing. Premeditation, conspiracy, captured in 4K with timestamps. Trenton watched it twice. Get this to the sheriff and the attorney general today. Don't wait. People like this don't stop escalating on their own. I forwarded everything that afternoon: video, DNR report, 3 months of documentation. Within 72 hours, the criminal investigation opened. Environmental crimes, conspiracy, trespassing. The prosecutor's office had apparently been watching Bryn for 2 years on smaller complaints but never had enough to move forward. I'd just handed them a case they could win. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of spending retirement savings on lawyers and emergency remediation. Tired of watching Melinda's hands shake worse every time disaster hit. I could send Bryn to prison now. End this. That night, Melinda found me sitting on the dock, staring at water I'd spent 47 hours saving. She sat beside me, her trembling hand finding mine. "Did we save it?" she asked. "Yeah, Lake's gonna make it." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "Garrett, what happens after you win? After she's arrested, after this is over, what do we have left? A place we can't enjoy because every time we look at it, we'll remember this nightmare?" I didn't have an answer. She was right. Winning in court wouldn't give us back our peace. Bryn would be in prison, but she'd have poisoned this sanctuary anyway, just by making us remember her every time we sat here. "I don't know," I admitted. She squeezed my hand. "Then maybe winning isn't enough. Maybe we need something more." I fell asleep that night thinking about those words. And when I woke up the next morning, there was an email in my inbox from Missouri Department of Conservation with a subject line I almost deleted as spam: "Grant opportunity private land conservation easements." Something about it made me pause. I opened it, started reading. And slowly an idea began forming, one that would turn everything Bryn had done against her, transform this fight from defense to offense, and build something she could never touch or take or poison. But first I needed to understand what I was looking at. The email sat in my inbox for 2 hours before I fully understood what I was looking at. Missouri Department of Conservation, Private Land Conservation Easement Program. The numbers jumped out first. 60% tax credit, roughly $140,000 over 5 years. $75,000 grant for restoration work. Property taxes cut to conservation rates, $4,000 saved annually, forever. But buried in paragraph 6 was the line that made my pulse quicken. Conservation easements are recorded at the federal level and supersede all local ordinances, covenants, and claims. I read it 3 times to make sure I understood. Then I grabbed my phone. "Simone, can a federal conservation easement block HOA claims?" My attorney didn't even pause. "Absolutely. Federal easements trump everything except eminent domain. An eminent domain on protected conservation land? That paperwork alone takes a decade. What's the catch? You can't develop it. No subdividing, no commercial use, and you have to allow managed public access for education and research. Why?" I explained the email. She was quiet for a moment. "You'd give up your right to ever develop this property just to protect it from Bryn?" "I was never going to develop it anyway. This just makes it permanent and untouchable." "Garrett, that's brilliant." I spent the evening reading every word of the easement requirements. Managed access through certified conservation organizations. Educational programming. Water quality monitoring, already doing that with Dr. Shen from Missouri State. Disabled veteran programs, my original vision anyway. When Melinda came home from physical therapy, I showed her the screen. She read slowly, her trembling fingers scrolling through the details. "You'd really do this?" she asked. "Lock it up forever? We were never selling. This just makes it official." I pulled up the easement map overlay showing how it would appear on every title search, every county record. Once this is recorded, anyone searching this property sees immediately it's protected federal conservation land. No HOA can ever touch it again. It's like armor. Legal armor. I smiled. And here's the best part. The easement requires public notification to all adjacent property owners. Bryn gets official notice that Lake Thornwell is now permanent conservation land. She doesn't just lose. She loses publicly, permanently, and everyone she claimed to represent benefits from it. Melinda's smile reached her eyes for the first time in months. "When do we start?" The application took until 2 a.m. land survey, ecological assessments, management plans, every permit I'd pulled. Every inspection I'd passed, every photo documenting 6 months of transformation from toxic swamp to healthy ecosystem. I submitted it with Melinda asleep on the couch beside me, her hand resting on my arm. 60 days until approval. 60 days while the criminal investigation into Bryn continued grinding forward. 60 days to build something permanent before she even knew what I'd done. Because I didn't tell her. Didn't tell anyone except Simone and the conservation officer reviewing my application. I'd learned from the grassroots fact sheet campaign, sometimes you announce your wins. Sometimes you build them in silence until they're too solid to tear down. But I did schedule one thing, an open house at Lake Thornwell for 2 months out, right after the easement approval deadline. Invitations to all 34 Thornwell Estates neighbors, county officials, DNR staff, VFW chapter, local press. I was going to give Bryn exactly what she'd claimed to want all along. Community access to Lake Thornwell, educational programs, public benefit, just not her version. Mine, protected by federal law, managed by conservation professionals, and permanent as bedrock. By the time she realized what I'd done, it would be too late to stop it. The lake she'd tried to steal would belong to everyone, and therefore, she'd never own any of it. The next 60 days were a masterclass in strategic patience. While Bryn's criminal investigation crawled through depositions and grand jury prep, I built something she couldn't see coming. Not a defense, an army. Legal fortress first. Simone Brackwell turned my 3 months of documentation into a federal civil suit. Every incident cataloged, every expense itemized, every camera clip time-stamped. Total damages, $67,000. Her strategy was surgical file for attorney's fees under the rule that says losers of frivolous claims pay the winner's legal costs. Bryn was already bleeding money on criminal defense. Now she'd face civil liability too. Two-front war, Simone explained. Make every day she keeps fighting cost more than surrendering. That's what they'd taught us in the Army Corps. You don't just beat an enemy, you make victory impossible to afford. Bryn had spent everything attacking me. Now every day forward would cost her more than the last. Veterans second. I called Hugh Parnell, commander of Disabled American Veterans Chapter 89, 72, Vietnam vet, wheelchair user since 71. I'd met him at a fish fry years back. Hugh, I'm building accessible fishing docks at a restored lake. Need help. I've got 40 guys itching for a project. When do we start? They arrived that Saturday, 20 men in their 60s and 70s. Some missing limbs, some with canes, all with tool belts and 40 years of experience between them. By sunset, we'd framed 2 docks with wheelchair-accessible ramps. Contractor value, $25,000. Cost to me, $240 in barbecue and beer. Hugh stood beside me at dusk, watching his grandson wheelchair user, cerebral palsy fish off the new ramp. This is gonna change lives, Garrett. That's when I understood. I wasn't building revenge. I was building legacy. Academic partnership third. Dr. Octavia Shen from Missouri State had been monitoring my water quality for months. Her grad students needed field sites. I needed free environmental monitoring. She offered $50,000 annually in research grants if I'd let undergraduate volunteers take samples twice monthly. They'd publish papers crediting Lake Thornwell. Good for science, bulletproof for my conservation easement application. Deal. Political cover came to me. State Representative Wallace Drummond saw news coverage of Bryn's charges environmental terrorism by an HOA president made compelling headlines. He called directly. Mr. Fisk, I'm introducing the Private Property Protection from HOA Overreach Act. Would you testify at committee hearings? Would I? I'd been documenting this fight so the next person wouldn't fight alone. Tell me when and where. He wanted my timeline, my expenses, every incident on record. Bryn wasn't just my problem anymore. She'd become the case study for what his legislation aimed to prevent. By week 5, I had something Bryn didn't: a coalition. Hugh's veterans showed up every weekend. Dr. Shen's students proved the lake's dissolved oxygen, pH levels, and species diversity were healthy for the first time in 20 years. Drummond's office scheduled me for 3 committee hearings. Simone filed our federal suit. Bryn had Porter, who'd already confessed and was negotiating a plea deal. She had embezzlement charges, environmental terrorism charges, and a public defender she'd been assigned after burning through 3 private attorneys and running out of money. The math was simple. She was climbing uphill with no ammunition. I was building downhill with an army. Week 7. Conservation easement approved. Federal registration. Permanent protection. Public notice sent to all adjacent properties including every house in Thornwell Estates. Bryn received official notification that Lake Thornwell was now protected federal conservation land, permanently restricted from private development, designated for public educational use, managed by Missouri Department of Conservation. Translation: she'd lost before she knew the fight had changed. I didn't call her, didn't gloat, just scheduled the open house for the following Saturday and printed invitations. That evening, Melinda found me on the dock watching 2 of Hugh's grandkids fish, one in a wheelchair, one walking, both laughing, both catching bluegill we'd stocked last month. "You did it," she said. "We're not done. Open house is Saturday." "No." She squeezed my hand. "Look at them. We already won." She was right. Beating Bryn was the fight. But this kid's fishing, veterans building, students learning, land protected forever, this was the victory. The thing Bryn had tried to steal was now shared with everyone, which meant she could never take it from anyone. The open house would make it official. But sitting there with Melinda's trembling hand in mine, watching those kids pull fish from water that was finally clean, I realized something. Bryn could show up Saturday or stay home. She could appeal her charges or plead guilty. She could rage or surrender. It didn't matter anymore. I'd already built something bigger than her reach, deeper than her spite, and permanent as bedrock. The invitation arrived at Bryn's house on Wednesday. Simple cardstock, professional printing, no spite in the wording. "You are invited to the grand opening of Lake Thornwell Veterans Conservation Center, Saturday, June 14th, 2 p.m. I didn't expect her to RSVP, I expected her to fight. 72 hours later, she filed an emergency motion for injunction. Her claim: the conservation easement was fraudulent conveyance to hide assets from her legitimate property claims. She wanted a federal judge to freeze all lake activity until trial, which could take years. Real goal: stop the open house, kill momentum, bleed me on legal fees until I gave up. Simone called at 6 a.m. "We have until Friday 5 p.m. to respond or she wins by default. 40-page brief, 17 exhibits, affidavits from DNR and county zoning. It'll cost $1,200. I looked at Melinda across the breakfast table, her hands shaking around her coffee cup. 3 months had aged her 5 years. But when our eyes met, she nodded once. "Do it." 72 hours became a blur. Dr. Shen's ecological data, Hugh's Veterans Program testimony, county zoning officer confirming educational use was legal. I compiled evidence until 3 a.m. 3 nights straight while Simone wrote the brief. We filed 43 pages at 4:47 p.m. Friday, hearing scheduled for Tuesday. Federal courthouse in Springfield, imposing limestone that echoed when you walked. Judge Marcia Talmadge presiding, Obama appointee, reputation for zero tolerance of bullshit. The gallery packed with veterans in dress uniform. Dr. Shen's grad students, 3 reporters, and 22 of Bryn's own neighbors supporting me, not her. Vic Castellano, her ex-husband, sat in back with arms crossed. Bryn arrived in designer suit, dabbing her eyes, playing victim. Her attorney, Clayton Renfro, solo practitioner, clearly drowning in federal court, argued with vague emotional appeals. "Your Honor, the community has been damaged by Mr. Fisk's actions." Judge Talmadge cut him off. "Counsel, do you have documentation showing Mr. Fisk rushed this easement to hide assets?" Clayton shuffled papers. "The pattern of behavior suggests..." "That's not what I asked. Documentation. Evidence." "Your Honor, if we consider the timeline..." "Counselor," Judge Talmadge leaned forward, "are you familiar with Rule 11 sanctions for frivolous filings?" His face went pale. Rule 11 meant financial penalties for wasting the court's time. "Miss Brackwell?" The judge turned to Simone. Simone stood, calm as glass. "3 points, Your Honor. First, easement process began before Ms. Castellano filed any lawsuit. Second, Veterans Center is educational and recreational use, explicitly allowed under agricultural zoning per county statement. Third, Ms. Castellano has never established any property interest in Lake Thornwell, not 1 square inch. This court doesn't protect non-existent rights." "Does Ms. Castellano own any portion of this property?" "No, Your Honor." "Has she ever?" "No, Your Honor." So this is her fourth attempt to manufacture a claim where none exists. Fifth, counting the fake surveyor incident. Judge Talmadge turned to Clayton. Has your client been advised about consequences of filing baseless claims in federal court? Before Clayton could answer, Bryn stood up in the gallery. That lake was ours. Everyone knew it. Ma'am, sit down. He's lying. He poisoned that water himself. The courtroom went dead silent. She'd just accused me of the environmental crime she was criminally charged with committing, in front of 3 reporters. Bailiff. Her heels clicked on marble as they escorted her out, voice rising about conspiracies and special treatment for veterans. The doors closed mid-sentence. Judge Talmadge looked at Clayton, who'd gone white as chalk. Motion denied. Mr. Fisk is awarded $1,200 in attorney's fees. Ms. Castellano, one more frivolous filing and I refer you to the State Bar for discipline. We're done here. Gavel, done. Outside, reporters asked for comment. I gave them 6 words. Justice worked today. That's enough. Hugh saluted. Dr. Shen grinned. The neighbors' people who'd been terrified of Bryn for years actually clapped. That evening, sitting on the dock with Melinda watching sunset paint the water gold, I should have felt relief. Victory. Peace. Instead, I felt something colder. Bryn had just self-destructed in federal court, accused me of her own crimes on record, and been thrown out by a judge who clearly despised her tactics. She'd lost the injunction, would owe me fees she couldn't pay, and had 4 days until the open house she couldn't stop. Cornered animals are most dangerous. What do you think she'll do? Melinda asked quietly. I don't know, but we're not the only ones on this property anymore. I gestured toward the shoreline where Hugh's crew had mounted motion sensor lights. Cameras, lights, alarms, and the veterans are doing security shifts through Saturday. You think she'd actually... I think desperate people do desperate things. I squeezed her hand. But we've got 40 veterans, county sheriff on speed dial, and every news outlet in Missouri watching. Whatever she tries, it won't work. I believed that when I said it. I was wrong. The call came at 2:47 a.m., 3 days before the open house. Motion sensors tripped on the north shoreline. Hugh, doing overnight security with 2 other vets, called me 60 seconds after the alert, voice low and controlled. Garrett, we got 2 people moving toward the aerator system. Carrying containers. Don't come down here yet. We've got eyes on them, and sheriff's already rolling. Stay on the line. I pulled on boots, put the phone on speaker so Melinda could hear. Through the connection came Hugh's whispered surveillance report. 2 figures in dark clothes, one hauling what looked like 5-gallon jugs, the other holding up a phone, filming. That's Porter, Hugh said. And Jesus, that's Bryn. She's actually here doing it herself. My stomach dropped. After the court humiliation, after being thrown out by a federal judge, after criminal charges and embezzlement exposure, she was still coming after my lake. They're at the aerator intake, Hugh continued, dumping something, liquid from the jugs. 3 of them emptied already. She's filming the whole thing on her phone. Why the hell is she filming herself committing a crime? 4 minutes of tense silence. Then, sheriff's lights just hit. Porter's running toward the woods. Bryn's just standing there. Garrett, I think she wanted to get caught. Through Hugh's phone, I heard Deputy Buckley's voice, same young deputy from months ago. Ma'am, you're on private property. You've just dumped industrial chemicals into federal conservation land. Hands behind your back. Bryn's voice, high and cracking. This is my lake. I have every right to protect community property from this man's theft. Ma'am, hands behind your back. Now, the metallic click of handcuffs. You're arresting me? He's the criminal. He stole our lake and you're all helping him. By the time I reached the shoreline 20 minutes later, it was a crime scene. Emergency lights strobing blue and red across the water. Bryn sat in the back of a patrol car, visible through the window, talking to herself. Porter was being chased through the woods by deputies with dogs. County hazmat arrived at dawn. They tested what Bryn had dumped industrial drain cleaner, caustic enough to destroy the entire ecosystem if it had circulated through the lake. But Hugh's team had stopped them after 5 gallons. We could flush the system, limit damage to maybe $5,000, 0 long-term impact. The security measures had worked. Hugh's veterans had worked. Everything I'd built to protect this place had actually held. Porter was caught an hour later, mud-covered and crying, confessing immediately. Said Bryn had convinced him this was their last chance to stop the illegal Veterans Center, that one more corrective action would prove to authorities I was the real criminal. She'd lied to him, used him, promised to cover his legal fees, then abandoned him. Within 48 hours, Porter had flipped. Full cooperation, testimony against Bryn, plea deal for reduced charges. He handed prosecutors everything. 3 months of text messages, planning escalating attacks, recordings where Bryn coached him on what to say if caught, evidence she'd been manipulating him from the start. Detective Strand from County Sheriff's Office reviewed the evidence that evening. Mr. Fisk, she filmed herself doing it. We pulled her phone videos of her dumping the chemicals, texts with Porter planning this, even voice memos where she talks about teaching you a lesson. I've never seen someone document their own crimes this thoroughly. The new charges stacked onto her existing ones. Criminal trespass on federal conservation land, attempted destruction of protected ecosystem, conspiracy, violation of bond. Bail set at $50,000. She couldn't make it. Bryn Castellano sat in county jail while her entire world collapsed. Criminal trial scheduled, embezzlement charges pending, every ally gone, her name in headlines as the HOA president who tried to destroy a veterans lake. I should have felt triumph. Complete, total victory. Instead, standing on the dock that evening watching Hugh's crew repair the aerator housing, watching water catch golden pre-sunset light, I felt something quieter. Melinda came down and stood beside me. Is it over? Yeah, it's over. How do you feel? I watched the veterans work joking with each other, completely unfazed by last night's drama. In 48 hours, this dock would be filled with disabled vets, their families, students, neighbors, reporters. The lake Bryn tried to steal would be shared with everyone. I feel ready, I said. Everything until now was defense. Saturday, we finally show what this place is supposed to be. A sanctuary. For everyone who needs one. I squeezed her hand. Hugh's crew is doing final setup tomorrow. Dr. Shen's students are posting educational signs. The caterer confirmed. We're ready. What if she can't. She's in jail, Garrett. And even if she wasn't, 40 veterans will be here. County sheriffs sending 2 deputies. 3 news crews confirmed. Whatever she tries, she's done. 48 hours later, I learned you should never say, "It's over," until the story actually ends. But Saturday came anyway, and it was perfect. Saturday, June 14th, 2 o'clock. 412 people showed up. I'd expected maybe 100 optimistic. But they kept coming. Cars lined the access road for a quarter mile, families with kids, veterans in wheelchairs, service dogs, faded Vietnam vet caps, Dr. Shen's students with clipboards, all 34 Thornwell Estates neighbors except Bryn, 3 TV crews, county commissioners, State Representative Drummond who'd driven 2 hours for this. Hugh's crew had transformed the shoreline overnight, 3 accessible docks with wheelchair ramps, educational signs about lake ecology, picnic pavilion borrowed from the VFW, the smell of barbecue mixed with clean lake water, no sulfur, no rot anymore, just water and cedar and summer grass. Dr. Shen gave the first presentation, showing before and after photos on a screen. The crowd gasped at the before images green toxic sludge that looked like a biohazard. The after photos showed what 400 people were standing beside now. Clear water, healthy fish, thriving ecosystem. Then Hugh spoke. 72 years old, Vietnam vet, in his wheelchair at the microphone. That's my grandson Caleb on the dock. He pointed to the main pier where 4 kids in wheelchairs were fishing, all laughing. He's 11, has cerebral palsy. Before this, I couldn't take him fishing, couldn't get his chair close to water safely. Now look at him. His voice cracked. This place gives dignity back. That's what Garrett built. Dignity. The applause lasted 30 seconds. I stood with Melinda, her trembling hand in mine, her smile wider than I'd seen in months. Representative Drummond took the microphone next. The Private Property Protection Act I'm introducing this session is inspired by what happened here. Mr. Fisk faced months of harassment and sabotage because someone decided his property should belong to them. We're going to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else in Missouri. More applause. But I noticed the TV crews filming someone in back Vic Castellano with his daughter, and beside them, reporter Cassidy Voss with a CBS microphone. She stepped forward as Drummond finished. "Mr. Fisk, can we get your reaction? 3 months ago, Bryn Castellano claimed this lake belonged to her HOA. Last week, she was arrested trying to destroy it. Now 400 people are celebrating what you've built. What do you want people to know?" Microphone in my face, cameras rolling. This was it. The moment to bury Bryn, list every crime, make her the cautionary tale. I looked at Melinda. She nodded once. 3 months ago, someone tried to take something that wasn't theirs, I said. But here's what I learned. You can't steal what's meant to be shared. This lake was never just mine. It was always for people who need it. Veterans who can't access regular docks. Students learning ecology. Families who want clean water. Real ownership means stewardship. Not how do I keep this, but how do I make this matter? I gestured to the kids fishing, to Hugh's grandson pulling in a bluegill. That's what conservation easements do. That's what this veteran center does. And that's what every property owner should think about. Cassidy pressed. Bryn Castellano faces 15 years in prison. Do you feel vindicated? I feel tired, I said honestly. And grateful for the veterans who built these docks, the students who monitored water quality, the neighbors who supported this instead of fighting it. My wife, who stood by me when it would have been easier to walk away. Vindication isn't the win. This is. I gestured to everything around us. Last question. Knowing what you'd face, would you do it again? I looked at Melinda, at Hugh, at Caleb holding up a fish he'd just caught from water that was finally clean enough to support life. Every single time. Some things are worth fighting for. The cameras cut. Then something unexpected, the crowd started clapping. Not polite applause. Real, sustained, standing ovation clapping that built and built. Veterans saluting, kids cheering, county commissioners on their feet. I'd spent 3 months defending property. But standing there with 400 people celebrating what it had become, I realized I hadn't been defending property at all. I'd been defending possibility. The possibility that something broken could heal. That something private could become shared without being stolen. That fighting was worth it if you built something beautiful. The celebration ran 4 hours. Kids caught 37 fish, all released. Dr. Shen's students taught families about water testing. Hugh's veterans demonstrated boat safety. Local news aired my interview that evening. By Sunday morning, it had 60,000 shares on social media. By Monday, I had emails from 7 other states' people facing similar HOA battles, asking for advice, wanting to know how conservation easements work, requesting copies of my documentation. Bryn Castellano's trial was scheduled for September. But that Saturday evening, watching sunset paint the lake gold while families packed up to leave, their kids tired and happy and sunburned, I realized something. She'd already lost. Not because she was going to prison. Because she'd spent 3 months trying to take something she never understood the value of. She'd seen a lake and wanted control. I'd built a sanctuary. And sanctuaries, once established, last forever. 1 year later. Bryn Castellano got 12 years federal prison. Porter got 3. Both are gone, and that's all I'll say about them. Their story ended. Ours kept going. Dr. Shen's ecology program made Lake Thornwell a permanent research site. 32 peer-reviewed papers published in year 1, all proving private-public conservation partnerships work. Her students discovered 2 species of native mussels everyone thought were extinct in Missouri. Turned out they'd just been waiting for clean water. Hugh's Veterans Program served over 200 disabled vets in year 1, 4 more accessible docks built, monthly family fishing days. Caleb Hughes' grandson with cerebral palsy caught his first largemouth bass in May, 3 pounds, released it back into the lake, cried happy tears. Hugh sent me the photo. It's on my fridge. Representative Drummond's Private Property Protection Act passed the Missouri legislature in March, signed into law in April. HOAs now must carry insurance, can't file liens without majority vote, and face automatic penalties for fraud. 3 other states introduced similar bills. Bryn's name isn't in the legislation, but everyone knows whose behavior inspired it. The conservation easement held. Federal protection meant the lake couldn't be touched by future owners, future HOAs, future Bryns. Protected for generations, permanent as bedrock. Melinda's Parkinson's progressed, that's the nature of the disease. But the stress ending after Bryn's arrest gave us 18 good months before symptoms worsened significantly. 18 months of sitting on the dock at sunset. 18 months of peace we wouldn't have had if I'd walked away. We used the tax credits from the conservation easement to pay for her in-home care 3 days a week. A woman named Rosa, patient and kind, who makes Melinda laugh even on bad days. Last Saturday was the first annual Lake Thornwell Veterans and Conservation Festival. 843 people. Fishing tournament, kayak races, nature photography contest, BBQ, bluegrass band. Kids everywhere. Laughter echoing across water so clear you could see fish swimming 8 feet down. I stood at the dock watching everything we'd created. Hugh teaching a kid to cast, Caleb racing other kids in wheelchairs down the accessible ramp, families picnicking, Dr. Shen's students showing children how to test water quality. Melinda's hand slipped into mine, shaking worse now, but her smile wide. "Was it worth it?" she asked. "All of it?" I thought about the $67,000 in legal fees, the 3 months of hell, the nights I couldn't sleep, the way her hands shook worse from stress. Then I thought about the 214 veterans who'd fished from docks they could actually access, the 32 research papers, the legislation protecting property owners across Missouri, the 843 people who showed up today to celebrate a place that almost died but lived. "Yeah," I said. "Every dollar, every sleepless night, every minute." After the festival, I did something Melinda suggested. I wrote a guide how to defend property rights, how to use conservation easements, how to document harassment, how to fight HOAs that weaponize bureaucracy. Posted it online for free. Within 3 months, 18,000 downloads and emails from 7 states asking for help. Bryn Castellano tried to destroy one lake and one family. Instead, she accidentally created a movement. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something so permanent, so beautiful, so useful that your enemy's name gets forgotten while your legacy keeps growing. Lake Thornwell is that legacy. Clean water, protected land, accessible docks, research informing conservation for decades, legislation protecting property owners, a festival celebrating everything good that comes from refusing to back down. That's what we built from 3 months of hell. And honestly, we're just getting started. So here's my question for you. Have you ever dealt with an HOA that made up rules to crush you? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and your story might help someone else fighting the same battle. Tell me where you're watching from too. I want to see how far this corruption spreads and where good people are fighting back. If this story fired you up, hit that subscribe button and join Karen's Stories. Next week on the channel, I'm covering the family who built a tiny home on land they legally owned, and the county tried to bulldoze it with 3 hours' notice. You won't believe the loophole they used to fight back. And if you know someone stuck in an HOA nightmare right now, share this video with them. Maybe it'll give them the blueprint they need to win their own fight. Some battles are worth having. This was one of them. Welcome to Karen's Stories, where we tell the stories of people who refuse to back down.